Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is the first of our public hearings for department budgets from the mayor's proposed budget. And this is a meeting of the Ways and Means Committee and the Budget Committee. This is a more informal process that we have. What we do is we'll listen to department presentations for a set amount of time, and we're going to be fluid on the schedule. But the first will be today will be the City Council budget segment, followed by the Clerk and Elections Department, followed by the Health Department, followed by the City Attorney's Office, and then finally the Assessor's Office. So we're really here scheduled till about 3:30, and we'll have time in between for some transitions and how those go. So I thought I'd just turn to Ms. Christensen before we start for some direction on how we're referring back to the budget overview and how we're going to be doing this, and then the presentations that'll be coming up will be posted online.
Operations today with the city clerk will be presenting for the city council as well as the clerk's office, as you alluded to. The presentations will proceed by the individual department head with opportunities for members of the Ways and Means and the Budget Subcommittee to insert questions. And as you mentioned, it's a fairly fluid and a little more relaxed atmosphere. So we anticipate that there will be some conversation along the way.
Right. Thank you. And of course, I'm joined today by council members Andrew Johnson, Council Vice President Elizabeth Glidden, Councilmember Lene Palomasano, and Councilmember Blong Yang. And although a quorum is not needed to conduct business today, we do represent a quorum, and other council members are always invited to attend and ask questions. But we are using speaker management today for ease of convenience, so if you could log into that, or if that is not available to you, just make your little tag known and we'll begin. So, Mr. Carl, welcome. First up, first in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, committee members. My name is Casey Carl. I have the privilege of serving as the city clerk. Today, I'll be presenting the mayor's 2015 recommended budget for both the city council and the office of city clerk, which I refer to collectively as the legislative department. We'll begin with a review of the budget proposed for city council, which begins on page F27 in your budget book. Following that, I'll review the proposed budget for the office of city clerk, which begins on page F19. The City Council is the legislative body of the city government. It's responsible for partnering with the mayor in the enactment of local laws and public policies to regulate, protect, and preserve the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Additionally, the City Council, through its standing committee system, provides oversight of the city administration and direction on business planning, service delivery, and program evaluation. Finally, council members represent their wards and constituents at local, regional, statewide, and national levels on a range of issues. This includes service on a number of governmental associations and outside organizations to advocate for the city's interests and priorities. This slide provides a snapshot of the City Council, which includes the 13 council members, their 26 aides, and their ward budgets. The mayor's recommended 2015 budget for the City Council program is $4.9 million, an increase of about 4% from the current fiscal year. The City Council, as a budgetary program, impacts all city goals and values, since it is the City Council which defines and articulates those goals and values. As the elected representative body of the city, it's the council's role to translate public will into public policy, guided in large part by these goals and values within the framework of the city charter. This slide compares the council's budgets from fiscal year 2014 to the mayor's recommended budget for 2015, as well as a graph showing expenditures by category. The mayor's recommended budget then doesn't include any changes in the city council program. Existing service levels from 2014 carry over into 2015, including all 39 positions associated with this program. The City Council program represents less than half of 1% of the entire operating budget for the city of Minneapolis. The entire program equates to roughly $12 per capita, which ensures the city's central body is able to provide its core services of policy, governance, oversight, and constituent representation. With that, Mr. Chair, I've concluded my review of the City Council program. I'm happy to stand for questions or to use the balance of my time for the clerk's office presentation.
I think that might be appropriate. Are there anybody that has any questions related to the city council portion? We'll just continue to blend in if you can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Office of City Clerk is the secretariat of the City Council, and it serves as the enterprise center for two programs, Elections and Voter Services and Records and Information Management. From a budgetary perspective, the office is divided into three big bucket programs reflected on this slide. About 3/4 of the department is supported by the general fund. The remainder is supported through internal transfers. The clerk's office is projected to contribute approximately $1.2 million in revenue next year, which is roughly equal to the total cost of our Elections and Voter Services division. The first budgetary program, Office of City Clerk, accounts for more than half of the total department budget. It encompasses three smaller programs. These include the Records and Information Management Division, the Legislative Support Unit, and the Department Operations Unit. In total, this program accounts for approximately $3 million. Roughly $673,000 of this program budget is allocated to the Records and Information Management Division. The remainder funds the Legislative Support Unit and the Operations Unit at just over $1 million for each of those programs. More than half of the personnel in the clerk's office are committed to either the Legislative Support or the Department Operations Units, which is why I usually present council and clerk as a single department, because about 55% of the total personnel and resources in the clerk's office actually are dedicated to supporting city council and managing daily operations for the entire department, which includes administrative support for council members and their ward offices. The second program is the Elections and Voter Services Division, which is responsible for planning and administering all elections within the city of Minneapolis. This division accounts for $1.2 million in the mayor's proposed budget. The third program is the Document Solution Center, which is functionally placed under our Records and Information Management Division, but is tracked separately for budgetary purposes. The Document Solution Center is proposed to be funded in the amount of $1.3 million, primarily through internal service funds, with a small general fund allocation that pays for citywide mail delivery. At a macro level, the clerk's office is structured along its core business lines, shown on this slide. Strategically, the outcomes from these three primary lines of business are the achievement of an elected representative government, the accessibility of local government decision-making, and the ability for citizens to be informed of their rights and to hold government accountable for its actions and policies. These are the hallmarks of good government, and no other department in the city contributes as directly to those outcomes in the same way that the clerk's office does. Put another way, the Elections and Voter Services Division assures a representative government is achievable by planning and administering free, fair, and impartial elections and protecting voter access to the ballot box. The Legislative Support Unit makes government decision-making accessible by ensuring compliance with legal, policy, and procedural requirements that govern the transaction of city business. This unit also codifies local laws which define the rights and responsibilities of community residents. The Records and Information Management Division leads enterprise information management and makes government records and data available so that the public is able to review the policies and decisions of its government and hold its government officials accountable. The Operations Unit contributes to the success of each of those primary business lines, but also provides centralized management, planning, and support for the entire council and clerk department. In addition, the Operations Unit provides a number of delegated services directly to the public. This chart illustrates the connection that the Office of City Clerk has to the city's goals and values adopted by the mayor and city council. For 2015, the mayor has proposed a number of program enhancements for which we are extraordinarily grateful. First, the mayor has proposed one new position for the Elections and Voter Services Division to assist with outreach, education, and engagement. This new position would increase the total staffing in our elections division from 5 to 6, which is the average for other first-class cities in Minnesota. Second, the mayor recommends one new program assistant position to provide administrative support for city council and its ward offices, including front desk reception, centralized office management, and project coordination. Finally, the mayor recommends ongoing funding for the systems administrator position that was approved in June by city council. That position will provide dedicated support for existing and new technology applications and systems which support our core business functions.
Excuse me, Mr. Carl. I just wanted to note Councilmember Johnson had a question.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, we'll go with Councilmember Andrew Johnson first.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
then we'll get
Chair.
to the president.
I was just wondering with the one FT for elections administration, with the goal of outreach, I know that our neighborhood and community relations department does a lot in terms of grants for different groups working on civic engagement and outreach, and was just wondering how that position will interface with those efforts and help enhance the efforts already being done within the city around outreach and engagement.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, we partner with the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department already on our outreach efforts and certainly use their resources and tools to broaden our message. It would be my expectation that we would continue down that path in the future. This extra position would give us the opportunity to focus our efforts in that regard, which would hopefully enhance and improve our ability to not only achieve better voter outreach and connection, but also improve our partnership with our sister city departments so that they can help amplify that message moving forward.
All right, thank you.
Council President Johnson. You were out? Okay, thank you. I think we can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In addition to those 3 FTEs, the mayor also recommends an increase of $40,000 in base budget allocation to support 2 technology projects within the department. Specifically, these monies will support the acquisition and implementation of a legislative information management system and the full implementation of a constituent relationship management system to serve the offices of mayor and city council. While the mayor generously recommended funding for the 3 new positions I described, there were 3 additional enhancements requested not included in the mayor's recommended budget. In her State of the City address, Mayor Hodges used the analogy of a baseball team with a weak bench to describe potential threats to the future success of the city. And this example is particularly apt for the city clerk's office, where all of our players on the team have been and currently are deployed, where there is no additional capacity, no backup players, no second string ready to fill in or relieve the growing burden, and where the players we do have are exhausted and nearing the end of their careers. In fact, of the 26 employees in the city clerk's office today, 12 will be eligible for retirement in the very near future, and that represents fully half of our existing workforce. This lack of bench strength and the need for additional capacity affects all of our divisions and units in the clerk's office. And for these reasons, we are requesting consideration of the 3 additional positions to build up our internal capacity and to enable the clerk's office to fulfill its legal mandate. I'll summarize each of those requests. As the committee is certainly aware and will be made very clear in the next few weeks, city government is engaged in providing a multitude of services, programs, and functions. And despite the differences between them, there is one product that serves as a common denominator for every single department, every single service, and every function at every level of government. That is records, what we call government data. Literally everything we do in government results in the creation of data. As the official custodian of all city data and records, and as the designated responsible authority under state law, the clerk's office plays a critical role in the management of data assets across the entire enterprise. The clerk's office envisions a city government where information is open by design. We believe this is essential to the vision of a well-managed city and demonstrates a commitment to equal access and transparency for everyone. To achieve this goal, we are requesting 1 new full-time records specialist position to function as the city's data practices coordinator. In 2012, we hired a former city clerk who was familiar with the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act as a temporary worker to handle our data practices requests. At that time, because we had that dedicated resource, we were able to achieve an average turnaround time of approximately 8 days on most requests. Since that time, having lost that resource, our average response rate has slipped, and we now range anywhere from 8 days to more than 1 month to respond to data practices requests. Currently, the clerk's office is tracking approximately 100 pending data practices requests, some that were submitted more than 2 months ago. We typically receive between 5 to 15 new data practices requests every week, which equates to about 3 to 5 hours per day to receive, acknowledge, log, refer, and follow up with city departments, which equates to about 25 hours per week, about a part-time job. In addition, though, the clerk's office is regularly consulted by all departments for clarification or direction on what is or is not government data, what is or is not public government data, what can or cannot be charged in fees for accessing public government data, and other assistance in making government data available to requesters. Moreover, the clerk's office acts as the central collection point for handling and responding to data practices requests that involve the city's elected policymakers or which involve multiple city departments. This additional level of work conservatively requires an additional 4 to 5 hours each day, which brings our weekly total to about 40 hours a week. So the clerk's office is already operating as if we had a dedicated full-time position to manage data practice requests. But the truth is we don't. We're doing it with temporary workers, which isn't the best approach to managing this mandated function that affects every department and assures equal and timely access and response to requesters under state law. What this chart attempts to illustrate is the impact of one additional FTE within the enterprise. As you can see, there are more than 3,700 employees in the city government. There are more than 400,000 residents of Minneapolis, and we don't have accurate data on the total number of law firms and attorneys, media outlets and reporters, and other stakeholders that require assistance with processing data practice requests. Under the weight of all of those numbers, the clerk's office is requesting one additional position to shore up our capacity to respond to data practice requests and to improve the centralized management of this critical core function that affects the entire enterprise. Council Committee Coordinator. Because of its function and its placement within the enterprise, our legislative support unit touches every single policy proposal, every single business item, and all other matters that come forward for action by the City Council and Mayor. This chart illustrates the multiple relationships that our committee coordinators have with their standing committees, and especially the committee chairs, the departments that report to those standing committees, the City Council and Mayor, and ultimately the entire community, as well as providing a high-level summary of the core processes that are administered by our committee coordinators. Currently, the Legislative Support Unit consists of 1 unit supervisor, 3 full-time coordinators, and 3 information specialists. The unit supervisor and our 3 full-time coordinators staff the City Council and its 12 standing committees. They also support the independent executive and audit committees. And this unit provides staff support for the Minneapolis Charter Commission and administrative assistance to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, as well as a handful of other boards and commissions within the enterprise. In total, this small group provides support to 22 separate decision-making bodies. By comparison, most departments that do support boards and commissions within our enterprise have a ratio of 1 staffer per board, sometimes 1 staffer for 2 or even 3 boards. In the clerk's office, the ratio is 1 clerk for more than 5 separate decision-making bodies. It's the most significant workload of this type in the enterprise. And when compared to our benchmark jurisdictions, the Minneapolis Clerk's Office provides more support to a wider variety of decision-making bodies than any of those communities, and that includes St. Paul, Portland, Seattle, Kansas City, Omaha, and Pittsburgh, to name a few. As this chart illustrates, each committee coordinator is assigned as the primary support to at least 3 decision-making bodies and is also expected to provide effective backup coverage and support to the other 19 bodies supported by the clerk's office. For those 3 assigned committees, the coordinator is the essential linchpin that keeps everything on track and on time and works to finalize countless details so that every agenda item presented is ready for action in what we call prime time. This chart shows that over the past 14 years, the number of decision-making bodies supported by the clerk's office has increased. Conversely, the number of staff within this unit have been cut. That means we have half the number of dedicated staff resources for our legislative support functions than we did just 14 years ago. To meet the increase in demand, it's been necessary for the clerk's office to employ a temporary worker serving as a full-time committee coordinator since January of this year. That's Lisa Hansen, who is clerking today's hearing. Lisa's not a full-time employee, but she is carrying the responsibilities of a full-time council committee coordinator, and our office could not accomplish its work without her during these past 9 months. What makes the matter more time-sensitive is the fact that of the existing 7 individuals who work in the legislative support unit, 6, that's all but 1, will be eligible for retirement within the next 5 to 6 years. And this is not a job easily learned, nor is it a common position where we can recruit from a readily available pool of qualified applicants. As you might imagine, this is a job that requires a significant learning curve, one learned only on the job over time in order to understand and work comfortably and effectively within the rules and regulations which govern the city's legislative process. Having gone through this last transition following the municipal election in 2013, it's clear to me the heavy reliance that not only new council members, but returning council members and all departments place on these critical core positions. But what that means is that we have the potential for a complete turnover in this unit by the time we have the next municipal election. Looking back over the last 9 months, I cannot imagine handling the transition of 7 new council members with 6 new clerks. Therefore, to counter this trend, the clerk's office is requesting 1 full-time committee coordinator position. Essentially, we're asking to make permanent the existing temporary position that we've had in place all year. That would give us a total of 4 committee coordinators under the supervision of the chief coordinator. It would expand our capacity to support the 22 decision-making bodies that are assigned to us, and it would give us a bit more flexibility in addressing critical succession plans in the next few years. And as we seek to implement the new legislative information management system, it will be critical for us to use this opportunity to capture and to systematize to the greatest extent possible the wealth of institutional knowledge that currently exists among this team. Finally, the clerk's office is requesting 1 full-time program assistant for the clerk's office in our operations unit. This is perhaps the most invisible unit to the council and to other departments, yet it is the nerve center of our entire department and contributes significantly to the success of the council and all divisions and units within the clerk's office. As you know, the clerk's office had been budgeted these past few years for an office support specialist. The incumbent is retiring this year, and we were hopeful to have that position sustained on a permanent basis. Had we been successful in keeping that position, we would not be asking for a new position. Unfortunately, that position was budgeted on a year-by-year basis, and the mayor did not recommend ongoing funding in 2015. During the past year, the clerk's office has employed 2 temporary workers to fill these requested positions, 1 located at the front desk of City Council and 1 at the front desk of City Clerk. Together, under the direction of our department's administrative manager, they work as a team. They handle all administrative functions for the department, which includes employee time tracking and payroll, accounting, budget reporting and reconciliation, procurement, and other functions. But in addition, they plan a number of projects and special events. And they are also responsible for administering the city's open appointments process and providing support and coordination for the more than 500 seats on the city's appointed boards and commissions, and they help to orient newly appointed board and commission members and train board and commission staff. They receive and register legal claims against the city, which can only be served upon the mayor or city clerk. They register domestic partnerships filed in the city of Minneapolis. They staff the Minneapolis Board of Appeal and Equalization, which has a direct impact on the city's bottom line, since that board's work impacts property tax revenues. They manage time tracking, data entry, approval, and audit functions for the 2,500 plus election judges that serve Minneapolis voters. They also provide notice of and process annual statement of economic interest filings, conflict of interest filings, and loyalty oaths for our elected officials, executive officers, public safety personnel, appointed board and commission members, and others. And they provide direct customer service at the front desks, both for City Council and City Clerk. As noted, the mayor has recommended the addition of 1 of these positions to support the City Council, but it is impractical to assume that the addition of that position will have any benefit to the clerk's office. Primarily, that's because we envision that position being physically tied to the council's reception area. In addition to providing dedicated reception for council's visitors and guests, that position will provide office management and handle a variety of council-specific projects. Since 2009, when the aide and associate positions in ward offices were politically appointed, it means that when a council member leaves office, so do the support positions. To counter that loss of institutional memory and operational continuity, it's important for us to have a dedicated position to handle the administrative functions of the City Council offices. And that's what we intend for this new position that's been recommended by the mayor to do, to act as the first line of support between the 13 ward offices and the office of clerk, which acts as the administrative arm of the entire City Council. So it's unlikely the new position will have any support to contribute to the clerk's office. But from the beginning, we've envisioned 2 program assistants. As this slide illustrates, the 2 program assistant positions were planned to back each other up so that there is no loss of support for breaks, lunches, vacations, illnesses, or other disruptions. This also will allow us to push much of the work now performed by the department's administrative manager to these positions, allowing the administrative manager to take on more tasks currently performed by the city clerk. In the absence of the team of these program assistants, the work will inevitably push back up the system, requiring the department head, that is the city clerk, to be directly involved in day-to-day aspects of payroll, purchasing, personnel administration, accounting, and similar matters. As with the new council committee coordinator we've requested, we are asking for this program assistant to be added, essentially making permanent the existing temporary worker that's been in our office all year long. And while it would not restore the clerk's office to historic funding levels in our operations unit, it would give us much needed additional capacity and bench strength.
Excuse me one second, Mr. Carl. I know we have Councilmember Yang who has a question.
Mr. Carl, going with your baseball references, wondering, I see how you at least did it for one committee coordinator, that's Ms. Hanson, and I'm wondering, over the next few years, how do you plan on replenishing the bench, or bringing talent onto the bench so that they can eventually replace the folks that are close to retirement? Is there a vision or a plan as to how that's going to happen, or is it going to happen much like Ms. Hanson?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, it's a good question, and I have to be honest and say I don't have a plan. It's one of the things that the team and I have started to discuss, is how do we handle a transition where you have long tenured members here who have an incredible wealth of institutional knowledge, who run this system that is critical to the entire city, and they're on a short clock. And knowing that it takes a long time to bring someone new on board, because it's not a job we can just go to the next city and hire. We need to work with that group to talk about how do we transition, what are the skill sets needed. We also, or I should say I don't foresee that we'll be successful at recruiting people to take these positions who stay for 25 and 30 years like the current team members have. We probably will be in a cycle of faster turnaround, or in those positions. And so not only do we need to look at the short term, replacing those who will be leaving the team, but a longer term approach of how do we replace people moving forward, and how do we use tools like our new legislative system that we're implementing to shore up some of that institutional knowledge so that the onboard and learning time can be reduced.
And Mr. Carl, at some point, will you have maybe a plan in place and let us know how we can be helpful as council members?
We, through the chair, one of the things that we started last year, Councilmember Yang, and have not finished yet this year, is a statement of intent that outlines strategic goals for the office of clerk and our accomplishment against those goals. We are in the process now, as many other departments are, in coming up with more of a business plan over the 4-year period that matches your term, and that would certainly be one tool for helping to communicate between the clerk's office and policymakers what we're doing, what we seek to achieve, and what resources we need to accomplish our goals. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This slide compares the clerk's budget from the current fiscal year 2014 to the mayor's recommended budget for 2015. This slide also provides a summary view of the expenditure categories for the department. In summary, then, Mayor Hodges recommends an increase of approximately $400,000 to the clerk's 2015 budget. That includes the 3 new positions I highlighted, as well as increases to the base budget to pay for 2 new systems. The mayor's recommended enhancements will enable us to improve upon, and in some cases enhance or even expand, the level of services that we provide through our various programs. Each of these program enhancements ties directly to the goal of managing the city well, and also touch on the priority goal of equity across the community. As with the City Council, the City Clerk budget program represents less than half of 1% of the entire operating budget for the city of Minneapolis. The entire program equates to roughly $14 per capita and provides all of the services and programs that I've described. However, as noted, the mayor's recommended budget does not include enhancements that support increased demand in our legislative support unit, records and information management division, or our day-to-day operations in the clerk's office. We respectfully request consideration of those 3 extra positions. With that, Mr. Chair, I've concluded my review of the city clerk program. I'm happy to stand for questions.
One off the top of my head, Mr. Carl, is do you have an estimate of the additional cost that you would have in the budget should all 3 budgets be considered?
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I don't have that information at my fingertips. I do have it from submitting it to the mayor's office, and I can certainly send it to you in the committee afterwards.
We'll be happy to look at those numbers. I'm always hesitant to start putting people and faces with budget requests. It's really how we're doing the job and how we're doing it now, and how we'll be able to do it better going forward with more, or what are our risks if we have less available to us. It's an ongoing conversation that we'll have amongst ourselves during this budget process. Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Carl on this budget item? Good. I think
Thank
that
you.
covers it very well. Thank you. We're 10 minutes early on our first hearing, and so we'll allow for some transition time for our next presentation, which will be from our Health Department. And I see Commissioner of Health, Gretchen Musicant, joining us. So we'll let you guys tee that up. I'll take this opportunity to introduce the additional council members who have joined us since the beginning. It's Council Member Lisa Bender, Council President Barbara Johnson, and Council Member Jacob Fry. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, although I remember I read something, you're not supposed to touch these. No.
Yeah, don't touch anything.
I did, though. So they'll have to adapt. Speaking of adaptation, given that I had about a half-hour slot and I have 11 different programs to describe and a number of mayoral recommendations, I decided to take a slightly different approach. And so you were attached to your agenda is a full PowerPoint, but what I'm going to present today is really just focused on the mayor's recommendations for funding. And so hopefully that will allow me to go quickly and allow you then to ask questions about things I skipped over. Included in your packet are explanations of how the programs fit with the city goals and values. And there are also graphics about how programs are doing and more background information about programs overall. So when we're done, please let me know if that was a good thing to do or if you'd rather I hadn't.
Appreciate your presence here, and we'll let you go through your presentation as you need. If anybody wishes to interrupt or ask questions, please either signal me or sign into speaker management, and we'll do our best to keep you on track.
Okay.
You've got an extra 8 minutes to your 30 minutes.
Thank you. And I should have brought the full PowerPoint then.
No, don't do that.
We do have the capacity at the end to flip over to the other PowerPoint, so if people have a question about a slide, we can all look at that together. So the first slide, the first two slides actually that I will cover list the program names we have, current funding, and whether or not the mayor has recommended additional funding. So the first program area is family and early childhood. While the mayor is very supportive of that work, there is no recommended change in our funding. School-based clinics, there is an increase in funding recommended by the mayor, and I will be going over that. Youth development and sexual health is another area of work that is closely related to both the school-based clinics and to the youth violence prevention program area. All of those have additional funding recommendations from the mayor. We also work in the area of senior services, most pointedly our Skyway Senior Center, but also home visiting that we do through the visiting nurse agency for young seniors who are not insured. No new funding is recommended in that area. Lead poisoning and healthy homes has some recommendations for additional funding. Emergency preparedness and infectious disease prevention is an area that we do collaboratively with Hennepin County that there is no recommendation for additional funding there. Food, lodging, and pools is an area where we have a number of recommendations for additional funding, which I will describe to you, as is true also of environmental services. Minneapolis Healthy Living Initiative will also be an area where we're looking for some additional funding. And then our core public health infrastructure, there's additional funding, but really it is just requests that are in the CARS system, and I will talk about what those are. And then you will see the last line on that slide is internal service allocation, which finance has, that's the way that they're helping us pay for the things we use, like BIS and HR and those kinds of things. So let's start with the first program where there is a recommendation for additional funding. The mayor is recommending $50,000 to support a half-time mental health counselor who will work at Roosevelt High School. We know that a significant number of teens have experiences with mental and emotional and behavioral disorders every year, up to 20%. We also know that providing services to these teens decreases their suspensions, their office referrals, and increases their attendance. We had a grant that ends in 2014 that allowed us to understand these needs at Roosevelt, and so we are building on that understanding with this half-time position.
Excuse me 1 second, Ms. Michigan.
Yes.
Can you describe how is that different than what the school district is doing in that area? Or how do you work with the school district, I guess I should say?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the school's approach to mental health has become one of, I don't know if they will describe it this way, but looking to others to provide. And so they have outside organizations coming in and providing mental health services in the schools. The school-based clinics are well situated to be a part of that. We're not the only providers because they have that same approach in middle and elementary schools where we don't exist. The counselors that they have, we might have thought of those folks as maybe mental health helpers in the past. They're primarily focused on college and career planning.
Thank you. Council President, please.
Ms. Musicant, so would this half-time person then be a city employee?
Mr. Chair, yes, Councilmember Johnson, this would be one of our staff with the school-based clinics. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Curiosity as to what kind of prep credentials someone would have for this position.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, we already have a number of mental health workers who work for the school-based clinics. They're credentialed in a variety of ways. All our masters prepared, either family therapists or advanced practice social workers, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The next area is youth development and sexual health, and here the mayor is recommending two things, one directly for the health department, one is a pass through the health department to the youth coordinating board. But the first one is $70,000 for us to contract with community-based agencies to provide culturally specific parent education and support. This is a strategy that has long been a part of our youth violence prevention blueprint. And we know that improving parenting skills has a positive effect on adolescent behaviors, and yet parents of adolescents are left to their own devices in many cases. We have found that without our support, there really isn't this kind of help in our community. And so we think it's important that we continue to support it. The second recommendation is $55,000, which would be used by the Youth Coordinating Board for them to continue and expand the teen youth workers in the downtown area. This is an effort that was very successful this year, and I believe was tried at least in part last year. The Downtown Improvement District finances at least half of it, and this will allow it to continue next year.
Excuse me, Ms. Musicant, will that position be hired by the city of Minneapolis or by the Youth Coordinating Board?
Mr. Chair, I'm unsure. I think if you have a chance to have a presentation from Ann DeGroot, I think that would probably get the best and clearest answer.
Thank you. I'll flag that. It looks like the funding source is going to come from the city. I just wanted to know if that's going to be a city employee or not, and we'll figure out that way for going forward. Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, on this education and $70,000 contract, is that an extension? Now, I remember last year and where we had a request to designate an agency ahead of the budget decision. Is that just in that kind of realm? Is this the same program or is it an additional
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, last year, I believe there was a one-time allocation that was
okay,
made,
okay.
and we did use that money for this purpose.
Okay.
And this appears to be an ongoing,
Another-
an ongoing expenditure, not a one-time expenditure.
So it would be for this year, but then in forever then, or, okay. So but it's the same program.
Yes.
I guess that's my question. And do we have a vendor? Who did we use last year? I was trying to remember.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, we did contract with 2 agencies. The Link was one of them,
okay.
and
So this just maintains
can-
the current funding level.
actually, it decreases the current level by half. It was
Oh, it's
150.
150? Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
But it's,
And so we see the need as much greater, but whether or not there's room in the budget, I guess is the question.
Okay, thank you.
it's described as an enhancement, though?
Mr. Chair, it's an enhancement in that it is not it has been a one-time
it's been
funding in the
one-time.
past, and this would be a part of the ongoing.
Thank you. Council Vice President, you had a comment.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, I think often the hard thing about initiatives from the health department isn't that they aren't worthy initiatives. It's really more a situation that there's so many areas and types of strategies that we can undertake, and trying to understand why you've chosen these particular ones as the most impactful and the most deserving of ongoing funding, you know, as opposed to some other things. So, I mean, I think you're always really utilize research well in your department, have creative approaches that involve community partners, those kinds of things. I guess what I would appreciate maybe is sending offline just a little bit more information on some of these initiatives that have turned from the one-time funding into ongoing funding, and what were the results you got from the 1 year that you think justified an ongoing investment. You know, just a little bit more on this. Again, it's not any knock on any particular initiative. Again, I think it's often more a question of why is this, you know, especially now that this is a less amount of money, for example, for the education support of parents of adolescents than you initially had wanted. Is it enough of an impact that this ends up being the worthwhile ongoing expenditure? Just as an example.
Point well taken, and we'll prepare an email for all of you,
Thank you.
at the end of this presentation.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
The next area is related, and that is our youth violence prevention work. In 2014, the city budget included ongoing funding for a senior public health specialist to create a program for identifying high-risk youth and then intervening with them. This came out of a repeated experience of seeing young people who were injured violently or got involved in something that they shouldn't be involved in related to violence, and having adults around them say, I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen. And so in addition to having mechanisms for those adults to come forward and say, this young person is heading down the wrong path, we wanted to see if data could help us with that. And so it's been more arduous than we thought to work on the data part, but we do have an agreement with the university now and have shared some police data with them, and by October should have some information back identifying factors where young people who were involved in violent situations might also have shown up in human resources or school databases, so that we can begin to say, this is how we are going to not let these young people be invisible to us. But not wanting to wait until we had that, we have started a pilot program to better understand what can we offer to young people who fit in this kind of category. And so we have a partnership with Tubman right now, and that is supported with some one-time funding from the general fund and a small supplemental grant we were able to get. So what we're looking for here is assurance that we will have funding for case management. It's been part of our data challenge has been that some of our partners, like the schools, say, well, what guarantee do we have from you if we identify kids that something good is going to happen to them? And so this is part of that assurance that, yes, we can build a system, we will be able to respond, and we will also be able to evaluate and learn about what we are doing, just as you mentioned, Councilmember Glidden. So that's what this funding is for. The next area is lead poisoning and healthy homes, and there are 2 recommendations. The first one comes from a change that has been made at the state and national level, identifying the level at which anybody, but especially young people, are poisoned by lead, and they have lowered the level. We have been intervening at a level of 10, and they have lowered the level to 5. This will essentially double or more the number of cases and homes that we need to be in. And so we are looking for one-time funding for an additional lead inspector so that we can respond to this new opportunity, kind of get a handle on it, get caught up, see what the volume is after we intervene at this new level. The second recommendation is another one-time funding, and our folks in lead and healthy homes have done work in the past in homes and done research around that work where they assess the home for asthma triggers. They bring in services like special vacuum cleaners, bed covers, air purifiers, and they researched that work and found a 70% decrease in school absenteeism due to asthma when they were able to intervene in that way. So what we'd like to spend this money for is someone who would help us kind of get into the inner workings of the Department of Human Services and health plans so that we can expand what is reimbursable by them to include this work that our folks are doing.
Mr. Communicant, if we could interrupt 1 second
Yes.
for Council Vice President Glidden.
Okay, thank you. Just a question then about the lead inspector. One is, can you give us a sense of what's the caseload right now and what you think it might be with the new level? And then second, with these new with the new definition of lead poisoning, are you foreseeing that there is any interest from the federal government or the state in once again funding lead abatement or other types of remediation programs? I mean, I just kind of in the big picture here and as someone who's represented a ward with a lot of lead issues compared to the rest of the city, my impression had been that a lot of the funding sources were drying up, even though we've been very, very successful in Minneapolis and in showing why our city is worthwhile in receiving those funds. So,
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Glidden, let me start with the second question. We have applied for another Lead and Healthy Homes grant and are awaiting notification of whether or not we receive that from HUD. So we hope to continue to tap into federal resources to help us do this work as well. And then you asked me about the caseload. The Lead and Healthy Homes team is currently working with the city coordinator's office to do one of the process improvement approaches. And so we're looking at the way that we are intervening in homes to see if there are any efficiencies, if we can speed it up at all, if there are extra steps that are being taken that maybe are redundant. So we hope overall to be able to even do a faster, smoother job. But what this lowering of the level allows us to do is actually to get into homes, because the ultimate goal for us is to change the home itself, because so many of these young families are renters and maybe moving and they move on and another family moves in. And so it's so important for us to get in and be able to change the windows so they're not creating lead dust anymore. And so the lower level and the greater number of cases will allow us to intervene in more homes. I don't have a specific answer for you in my brain about what their current caseload is.
Okay, and then maybe just one more question, which is that, again, kind of going to this theme for this area, the healthy homes. I know you've been working on how to look at more of an array of issues that are environmental hazards within the home and how we might impact that. And I'll just kind of say my interest is how we're able to cross-pollinate, not just have someone who, and again, it's very complicated work on lead, I know that, but not just have someone who goes in and they identify how to remediate the lead issues and all of that, but how are we thinking about the broader array of environmental hazards in the home and how investing in an additional inspector helps us think about that. So maybe that's more, I guess, thinking about how you're both looking at your practices and then your policy recommendations that help us think about that. But again, if it's an older home that has lead issues, likely there are other environmental hazards often existing in that home. And so anyway, that's my concern is we're so focused on the one, which is very, very harmful, but then not able to correct for some of these other harmful.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Glidden, I appreciate those concerns. That is an approach we want to be moving more towards. In fact, our new grant from HUD takes that focus, but there are some changes at the local level that we would like to make. We did have a CARS request in for some support to create a computer system that would allow various home visitors all to kind of enter into one system and get people connected to their resources, and that has not been recommended to move forward.
So the land management system won't do that?
What we were looking for was something that would help even agencies outside the city,
okay.
in addition to the internal ones. Okay, food, lodging, and pools. This is really because of our growing and varied food economy that we have here. There's a recommendation for 3 additional staff. The first one is for an additional health inspector sanitarian. And in 2012, we did have a number of additional staff. But since that time, there have been 813 more food-related businesses, and that represents about a 20% increase in our inspector workload. So our caseload is about 310 establishments per inspector. The FDA recommends 180 to 225. So we are, way out there. And so just in order for us to do the job that we should be doing and are delegated to do by the State Health Department, we feel that at least one more staff person to do that work is important. The second recommendation from the mayor is to fund a plan reviewer, and because of all these new businesses, our ability to give advice, help develop appropriate approaches and the right kind of equipment is really stretched, and our workload is currently more than double that of the state or our local counterparts. The final one is kind of a different approach that we are taking, and this would be to create a food industry liaison. Minneapolis is locally owned, and immigrant and chef-run businesses really lack the support that chain restaurants have. So if you open a McDonald's, you get this big corporate manual, and you get consultants from McDonald's, and they tell you how to do everything. But if you're an entrepreneur and you are doing the same size business, you got to figure it all out yourself. And if you come and you don't speak English as your first language, that makes it even more difficult. And so what we would like to do, and we've done some focus groups already this year, is to develop more hands-on training for food service workers and immigrant entrepreneurs so that we can all feel safe about the food we're eating and that their businesses are viable.
In all these enhancements, especially when we're talking about additional employees, how does this represent of what you requested versus what was provided in the mayor's recommended budget? For example, on food, lodging, and pools, you had one additional FTE, health inspector, sanitarian. Did you request one, or did you request three?
Mr. Chair, already my memory has faded, but I believe we requested more than one.
Okay.
4 instead of the 3. Okay, we requested, one more.
I'm just trying to evaluate, what you need to do your job versus what you have to do your job and how we're matching those
Right.
objectives. So.
Yeah, thank you, good question. And I'm so glad I have backup here. The next area is environmental services, and here there are 2 recommendations as well. We have a 2014 federal audit by the Environmental Protection Agency, which found our inspector staffing to be inadequate to perform the required work. And so there's a recommendation for an additional environmental inspector. And this is generally financed through the Stormwater Fund. The second recommendation is $25,000 in one-time funds, to complete our 2-year air quality study that was started last year. When we are done, we will be able to look for up to 72 chemicals from 120 locations throughout the city. As a city, we're on the edge of, in danger of failing federal air quality standards. And so we think that this local understanding of issues will help us work directly with sources of pollution and work with communities to better understand what kinds of options we have to improve further the air that we breathe. And then this final area relates to the Minneapolis Healthy Living Initiative. The recommendation is for one-time funding for one staff person for a year to address tobacco prevention. We had funding from the federal government. It was called CTG grants, Community Transformation Grants. Supposed to have 5 years of funding. The federal government decided across the board that Note 3 was all anybody was getting. And so there are a lot of kind of things at play that we would like an opportunity to bring to fruition. The Minneapolis Public Housing Authority has passed a smoke-free housing policy, but in order to implement it in all their buildings, and they have 4 buildings left, they've implemented in all but 4 of their high-rises, they really need the support of outsiders to help them offer cessation, to bring the policy and ideas and ways to live with that new policy to the residents. We also have a great deal of energy from our young people that have gone around the community and identified all sorts of ways that the tobacco industry is focusing on them and targeting them. And they have developed some recommendations. We'd like to be able to support them in taking their ideas to fruition. And then there are a number of other tobacco-related initiatives that we think that this person could help us work on and complete. So we were asked to also tell you on a slide how the department is doing. That was a big job in 2 to 3 steps. So I kind of folded everything into 3 ideas. Just a reminder that the general fund of the city supports less than half of our budget, and it's possible for us to operate this way because we are pretty darn good at competitive and categorical grants. We are also planning to, and bringing this forward through the IGR process, to work with our colleagues across the state to increase the state funding of local public health. So we hope that that will give us a stronger base. The second area is to talk about, okay, all these 11 programs, wow, that seems like a lot for a small department, but we really work intentionally across all the programs, and our focus is on equity. So really it boils down to healthy populations, so thinking about people, and then healthy environments, the surroundings in which we all live, work, and play. And finally, our successes, and we have a number of successes. I think I shared that with some of you, some of the disparities we have affected. It's really because of the way that we work with community. We work with other departments in the city and organizations across the community. So this next slide is our CARS recommendations from the mayor. And these were reflected in the core public health infrastructure program line that I started with. The mayor's recommendation is $150,000 for hardware needs related to the enterprise land management system, which we've identified as needing new stuff to go with the new software. And then to accompany the positions that were recommended, some additional vehicles will be required. And so the $75,000 that's recommended will help us purchase 3 Ford Focus and 1 Ford Escape. This is a comparison of our 2014 and 2015 budget. You're welcome to look at that. I'm going to talk about it in the next couple of slides. On the expenditure highlights, so the general fund support for the department in 2014 is $7,402,000, and in 15 it's $8,438,000. Personnel costs increased by 14.5%. Some of that is cost of living increases for existing staff, and also support for the additional 6.5 FTEs that are recommended. The contractual and operating costs increased by about 6.5%, reflecting the $225,000 of programmatic recommendations from the mayor. You will see on the previous slide a significant reduction in operating costs. That just reflects some coding modifications used by the department. Our actual operating expenses are essentially flat from 14 to 15. And the final slide, I believe, is some comments on our revenue budget. Our general fund revenue is relatively stable with a slight reduction of just under 2%. That really reflects changes in practice for food, lodging, and pools. We're using more carrot and less stick, so fewer fines, more education and technical assistance, which we think is actually more effective. The special revenue is projected to decline 4.2%, primarily due to 2 federal grants that came to their completion. I told you about one, the Community Transformation Grant. Also, a Lead in Healthy Homes grant that we currently have will end by the end of 2014. It's always a challenge for us to tell you exactly what grants are going to be like in the next year, because we don't always hear in the timeline that we have to discuss our budget here. So we continue to look for grants, and we continue to be fairly successful. In 2014, we received a federal research grant on supporting new fathers. We were one of 4 in the whole country that was funded. And then we recently heard about a 5-year renewal of our Healthy Start grant, which was more competitive this year than ever. Many other cities that had been funded for a decade or more were not refunded. So we feel very fortunate to have gotten that. Are there questions?
I wonder if you might be able to go back a couple of slides to your comparison sheet. That's that one.
Oh, the 14 and 15?
I wonder if I could just look at that a little bit.
Yeah.
See if that might prompt some other questions. Good. Were there any comments or questions from Ms. Muchkamp? I think we're in good shape. Thank you. We have more? I missed it. Okay. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I have a question about in the environmental services, the the huge volume and increase in building permits and how the field of the environmental services for the health department seems to be, at least from my own perspective, very, very deeply impacted by the number of different building projects going on. Is there any, do you have the ability to shift people on an activity basis? My understanding is that the environmental services part of the health department deals with all noise issues, erosion issues, all pollution issues. And those have been, with all of the building going on, the number of complaints have greatly escalated. And I'm just curious what that staffing looks like from your perspective.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, it is somewhat seasonal. And so we do look at the opportunity to have interns come and experience working for the city and learning, as also a good time for them to come in the summer so that they can kind of fill in some of the gaps that come with the increased demand. And it was soil erosion and our ability to kind of monitor that in all these building sites, I think, that led to this federal audit finding. So that is one reason we are asking for additional staff, even as a base. But we do try and flex, especially with interns. And if there are projects that can be done not in the summertime, we'll try and get those on the staff agenda when things are not really popping with building.
Thank you. Just one follow-up question. Then do interns, are they able to be credible witnesses, to like write citations or to stop work on a project if it's problematic? Or is that then kind of escalated to the nearest person in the field?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, I believe that we don't give interns jobs that are beyond their scope, but they allow our other staff to do the more difficult work. Maybe Mr. Huff has something else to add to that.
Mr. Huff, you're welcome to join us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, and Councilmember Palmisano. My name is Dan Huff, Director of Environmental Health. Our ordinances are written in such a fashion that the commissioner or her designee has the ability. And so we make sure that our interns have the requisite training, and then they are given the authority to enforce the city's ordinances, which includes issuing orders to construction projects, shutting down if needed, issuing citations as needed, all under the direction of our supervisor for environmental services. So yes, they do carry out their duties as a seasonal environmental inspector, and actually that's we're retitling that for next year. It'll be a seasonal environmental inspector as opposed to intern, to more accurately demonstrate what the job duties actually are.
Thank you, Mr. Huff. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Just a couple of things. We had one follow-up item from Councilmember Glidden. We look forward to having those responses. But I also wanted to point out, as we post this presentation and then your more expanded version, I think that as I was looking through the expanded version, certainly has some answers to justification and measurements, because I think it's really important that we're measuring what we're doing, and those are being tracked by your department and shared in Results Minneapolis. And so we'll be able to demonstrate what's success and what's at risk if we're not able to continue to do the work. So with that, I think we're ready. You have accomplished a great feat, and you're 2 minutes early.
Of course, you gave me 10 extra minutes.
I didn't want to mention that, but it was 8 extra minutes, but who's counting?
Okay.
So we look forward to some transition time, so allowing Ms. Siegel to join us with the City Attorney's Office. Looks like she's bringing in backup.
That was very nice of you.
We've been joined, of course, by Councilmember Gordon. Thank you for joining us. I just wanted to alert that we are using speaker management, or feel free to flag if you'd like to make any comments or questions. Ms.
Sorry,
Siegel, welcome.
just a couple of little technical problems, like where do I put the?
Right. The city attorney needs to know where to put the flash drive in.
Okay, that'd be great. Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready, I think we're
I'm
ready.
if you're ready to go. Thanks. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and glad to be here. I've got to introduce my team here.
You only have a half an hour.
That's all right. Well, good. We'll take it up with things like this, though. So Lynn White, who keeps me sane, Karen, who helps run our civil division, Jessica Casper, who is helping out with the administration and budget, Tim Richards, one of our criminal supervising attorneys, Mary Ellen Hang, criminal deputy, and of course, Professor Peter Ginder, the head of our civil division, as well as Colleen O'Brien, who's our office manager. We have a great team in the office. We have split our department into 4 different programs, half in the criminal division and half in the civil division. The criminal division is funded from the general fund, and the civil division is funded out of the self-insurance fund. So 2 things to keep in mind. So in our criminal division, first program is our community attorney program, which has been a very successful program. We have 1 prosecutor housed in each of our 5 police precincts. They share 3 paralegals. We used to have 5, but you know, with budget reductions, we've actually managed very well now. I think they're very talented people with just 3. And their job really is to work with the community, with neighborhood groups, with local neighborhood business associations on public safety issues that may be unique to particular precincts, as well as working with the precinct officers and providing advice and guidance to them. And so we staff a number of court watch groups, which really are, and I know most of you have attended those before, but they're really great ways to engage the residents of the city of Minneapolis in what they need for safety in their own communities. And I'm pleased that we've added, and it's just starting to get up and running now, a court watch group over in Cedar Riverside. Next slide. Then, so these are not actual real life crime fighters, but Nnamdi Okoronkwo, who's our Nick Fury lookalike over there on the side, is our 4th precinct community attorney, and he, along with Jonathan Price, got an award this year for what's called Project Superhero, and so they dress up as superheroes. They go to North Regional Library and work with reading with kids, as well as discussions about what it might take to become a superhero in your own community. So and then I know I've spoken to you before, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but our downtown programs, the Downtown 100, and our relatively new 18 to 24-year-old program, which focuses on that age group of 18-year-olds to 24-year-olds. Both have been extremely successful in really achieving longer-term results by working in partnership with social service providers, St. Stephen's Homeless Outreach, and other providers. And we started with 0 probation officers when I started. We are now up to 3, so we have 2 probation officers now for the Downtown 100 program and the 18 to 24 program, so we'll be able to expand our services and our work with 18 to 24-year-olds, as well as a probation officer who works with our citywide 200 chronic offenders. And so our focus of this program is not how many days in the workhouse we can get in these cases, but it's really to get these people assigned to probation and to connect them with needed services so that they can really turn their lives around. For the younger people in particular, become productive adults, get their GED if they need it, job training, and the like. So I'm very pleased with their work there. I won't go through all the results measure in the interest of time. Our second program, wait, did I skip the enhancements for this program? I think I did. I'm sorry, yeah. That's the most important part of the presentation.
Yes, please.
All right. So the mayor in her recommended budget has given us what we asked for, which is $75,000 in ongoing funding to help support these 3 probation officers. This is less than 1/3 of their overall cost. The Downtown Improvement District funds about $90,000 of the salary for these probation officers. We are funding $75,000 of it, and then the balance of it is being picked up by community corrections by Hennepin County, which is over half of the overall cost, as well as $15,000 to help with a shortfall in the Downtown Improvement District grant for our Downtown 100 prosecutor. All right, so moving on to our criminal prosecution program, which is the largest program, obviously, in our criminal division. The caseload here remains quite heavy, 24,000 some cases per year. We've had just great results over the last 5 years. I know I've talked already about our increase in conviction rates in domestic violence cases. We've improved victim witness services. We've automated discovery with the public defender's office. So there's e-discovery, electronic discovery going back and forth, as well as electronic charging now, which has really increased efficiency for our office, as well as for the public defenders and the courts. We've increased the number of cases actually going through trial, which is a very healthy thing in the criminal justice system. And we've increased our conviction rate. When I first started, we had about 30 cases or so that went through trial. Last year, we had 87. It was about a 50-50% conviction rate. It's up to 70% last year. Great record in appeals. We won 9 out of 9 cases last year in criminal appeals. And then we've also maintained the elimination of 2 out of 7 of our management positions. One thing that we've been thinking a lot about in the last few years in our criminal division is what we can do in our shop about racial disparities. And so one thing we've done is make sure that our court watch groups, that we're in diverse parts of the city. And then we've created diversion opportunities. We have the driver's license diversion program. A year ago, we created a diversion program for shoplifting cases, and we continue to work with and expand opportunities for restorative justice. And then we've got a chart here showing the number of defendants, in fact, that we've succeeded in referring to diversion programs. And an enhancement in our criminal prosecution program that's been recommended by the mayor is to give us full-time FTE to help further this diversion work. Because a bottleneck, practical bottleneck that we've got in expanding that work is that there are only so many cards that police officers can carry around with them at any given time. Like, oh, here's the shoplifting number, here's the driver diversion number, here's this number, here's that number. And what we'd like to do is move as much of this work as we can upstream into pre-charging diversion rather than post-charge, so that people don't ever get a charge on their record. But we need somebody to monitor that. Is the person following through? Are they not following through? How many opportunities have they been given? And then we also, quite honestly, just need help in developing and working with different kinds of diversion providers in order to further our work in this area. So this is one practical way that we came up with, where police just have to carry one card. That would be the phone number for somebody in our office. And so we can try to move this work upstream more into a pre-charge diversion and to expand our array of diversion opportunities.
Is this employee a attorney or a paralegal staff person? How does that get classified?
Mr. Chair, I'm thinking of a non-attorney position. I mean, the person could have a JD, I suppose, but really somebody who has some experience and knowledge in this area of working in diversion, of working in the criminal justice area. But those we're starting to try to put together a job description for what we're envisioning here. But I see it as a non-attorney position, somebody who really has knowledge in this area and has worked in this area.
Councilmember Glynn.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you flip back to the chart before we just had the numbers? I was just trying to, this one was just trying to read it. So is the total number, I just might want to make, maybe you want to just walk us through this chart so I make sure I'm reading it right.
We've got full year 2013 numbers, and then the first half of 2014 are the two bars. And so in 2013, we referred a total of 2,322 individuals to diversion programs. 2,070 of those were to our driver diversion program. 252 were to restorative justice, and that's all we started up our diversion program with the first people referred in, when, Mary Ellen, to that? The beginning of this year? Yeah, the beginning of this year. So for the first half of 2014, we've got 1,184 individuals referred to driver diversion, 84 referred to restorative justice, and 33 to the shoplifting diversion, new shoplifting diversion program.
And then, I mean, those numbers look like a lot of cases that are referred to the diversion programs. Can you give us any sense of scope? What percent of, anyway, I just wanted to get a little bit more perspective on what these numbers mean.
You wanna?
I look at them, there's zeros after them, but.
Yeah. It's relatively small. And I should have brought the numbers along compared. Do you have additional things to add, Tim or Mary Ellen?
It is a relatively small percentage. The driver's program is probably the widest in scope. There's certain disqualification criteria that the state puts out that we can't do anything about, but if people get past those, we'll pretty much give anyone at least one opportunity to do that program to try to get their license back. The restorative justice is geared more towards low-level livability offenders with a very minimal criminal history. And then the shoplifting diversion program, we wanted to, since it was new, we wanted to kind of ease everyone in, so we limited it only to shoplifting cases, first-time offenders. We're just getting ready to expand that with our staff to a few more offenses that we think are appropriate. And so, and as we see success and see that people are used to using those programs and that there's, that defendants want to participate in that, we'll consider expanding those even beyond what we do. And we're going to be working with our staff. We're putting out a new policy procedures manual where we're going to emphasize, remember, these programs are out there, and make sure that people know that these should be offered to people who are eligible. And I think we'll start seeing those numbers hopefully grow.
And then these numbers reflect post-charge diversion, and so it would be for the future, you're looking at how to move the program to a pre-charge opportunity.
The shoplifting numbers are all post-charge at this point. We are going to be looking into, and I think with the advent of this new position, we'll be able to do pre-charging on that offense. Restorative justice and driving diversion are a combination. We try to do as much pre-charging as we can, but for people that don't realize they're eligible and that, we are offering that in court as part of a court resolution. But we're hoping to move more towards pre-charging on all of these offenses so that there is no court record and we can do this all outside of the court system.
So I just have two more questions. One is, are you able to share what other offenses you're evaluating for appropriateness for this program?
For restorative justice, we've expanded. One of the big ones we've worked with them is we're actually going to, right now, furnishing alcohol to a minor, which we see a lot from our regulatory services, is actually a gross misdemeanor offense. And so we're going to be adding restorative justice as a resolution to allow people to plead as a misdemeanor to that for ending up with a vacation and dismissal of the charge at the end of a couple of years if they complete that restorative justice. In the past had not been wanting to take those kind of cases, but have said they're willing to work with those. The theft diversion program, we're going to actually expand to what we call the dine and dash, people that go to restaurants, don't pay their tabs, people that don't pay cab fare that get misdemeanor offenses for that. The program will be able to allow them to take the class, learn from that experience, and pay restitution to the restaurant owners and the cab drivers if there's restitution. So I think we're expanding at least to those programs, and then we'll consider to some other programs as we see how it's successful.
My other question is how you're evaluating how you might communicate about these programs. And I say that because I think there's probably a pro and a con to how you communicate about them. I know I've seen some other cities that have been kind of more, and I know this is somewhat new still, but that have been a little bit more public about this. I can see the con to that too, in terms of what's the expectation set in the community. It's I think, evaluating building trust and looking at how we're trying to be fair and evaluating, what may go on your record or not versus.
We've been very vocal about promoting these programs. One of the big things we've done is I've reached out to the public defender's office and made sure that they're aware that these programs exist. So, if for some reason in, the heat of a calendar, someone doesn't think that this person might be eligible, they're aware of what the eligibility criteria are, and they can say, hey, would this be something my client could do? Because we've picked these programs for one really important reason. Not only is there a benefit to defendants in helping them, from whatever mistake that they've made, whether a one-time mistake of shoplifting or forgetting to pay a couple tickets and getting to that hole of having now, $500 or $600 and they can't get their license back. It gives them an opportunity to correct that situation with hopefully keeping their criminal record fairly minimal. But the other reason we picked all these programs is they hold people accountable and give them a consequence. So it's not just a free pass for them. They have to take some sort of a class or do the community conference. They have to make, with the driving diversion program, other than a few cases that we might choose to dismiss because people are choosing to do the program, we do tend to dismiss a few of their tickets for them. They have to pay everything else off. So it's a win-win for everyone as far as we see. It's holding people accountable, giving them a meaningful consequence, but allowing them to move forward without having, a long, lengthy criminal history or having one mistake hang over their heads for the rest of their lives. So we've been very vocal. We don't shy away from promoting them. Our community attorneys are out there talking about them because we want people to take advantage of these programs.
Thank you.
All right. Then moving on with enhancements to the criminal prosecution budget. There's a couple of one-time funding items. The first is we asked the mayor for $50,000 for one-time funding to try a pilot. One thing when I attended the Northside Safety Summit several months ago that struck me from the data being presented by the Minneapolis Police Department was that the number one call for service, 911 call for service in the violence hotspots, the call for service was for domestic violence. And that really struck me. And so we, the head of our domestic violence team, Michelle Jacobson, Deputy Chief Chris Arneson, as well as Representative Carol Arthur from the Domestic Abuse Project, we've been meeting to analyze the data further and to try to figure out some solution, because we all know that kids who witness domestic violence have just terrible demographic data attached to them, as well as, all the other issues that go along with domestic violence. And so we are developing a proposal here where there would be a combination of domestic advocates going out with police and following up on domestic violence calls 911 after the fact, particularly focusing on cases that may not result in criminal cases, but offering services, referrals, giving the police an opportunity to be viewed by that community as helpers and problem solvers, not necessarily just enforcers. The second enhancement is this is a program that started in 2014. It used to be a free service offered by the Council on Crime and Justice. They couldn't manage it any longer. We did a request for proposal over a year ago to be able to provide a 24-hour hotline for domestic abuse services. And the Domestic Abuse Project stepped forward and is providing this service to the city, and we're splitting it half and half between our office and the police department. We had one-time funds available in our budget already for 2014. We won't have that in 2015, and so the mayor's recommended $75,000 in one-time funding to keep that going for another year. We do feel that that's a really important service to provide, and the Domestic Abuse Project can't subsidize it totally.
Excuse me, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Ms. Siegel, how would you be addressing translation services, making sure that the hotline is equipped to handle that kind of issue?
Yeah, Domestic Abuse Project, I think, has pretty robust translation services because, and I know that they've got multilingual staff now in off hours. I'm not sure if they use a translation service or what they do, but I know that they are fairly adept, and I can provide you with more information from them on what they do to make sure that they've got multilingual assistance available on a 24-hour basis.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is actually from a few slides back. I really appreciate the funding for the domestic hotline and a lot of the work for the attorney's office. I was looking at the slide on equity, and it made me curious about what we're doing to capture racial data in terms of who gets prosecuted, who gets charged, who gets directed to a diversion program, and that just and not only maybe racial data, but what part of the city it comes from. I'm just interested when we're looking at equity that at least we're shedding light on any possible disparities in some of our own practices. And is that the kind of data that we have and that we could look at?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Gordon, I'm really glad that you raised that question. It is something that we are in the process of developing. We figured out we can import a lot of that data, I think, from MPD's databases, and actually that's a job that I would assign to this new position in our criminal prosecution division, is somebody who can help us pull data, analyze it, and review it. I think it's critically important.
Oh, fantastic. And then I'm even more happy about the new position to have that done. I think that will be key. And even hopefully we then, using the police department's data, we can go back to arrests. And I am curious if we actually collect racial data for stops, but that's probably not something you would know necessarily. But there's always those questions about, are we doing any racial profiling? And if so, where does it start and where does it go?
Correct. Yeah, we would, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Gordon, that's not something we would have in our data, but I'm assuming that is available, through a CAPR system.
Thank you.
And then again, I'm not going to go through the results measures. I've got 7 minutes left, though, but let me turn to the civil division here. And we split that into two programs, client services and litigation. Again, that's funded out of the self-insurance fund, not the general fund. And They have had a very busy year as well, both in litigation as well as in client services. I saw they did over $600 million worth of revenue bond deals. I know we kept Nikki Newman quite busy on the Downtown East development. She did amazing real estate work on that. And we were involved in doing the legal work for the creation of over 1,210 affordable housing units in the city of Minneapolis. In addition to all the other work that we do in supporting public works, regulatory services, and all the other city departments. We asked the mayor for one enhancement here, which she included in her recommended budget, and that would be a position to help us with data practices requests. And I know that that's something that was in the city clerk's budget presentation as well. It does seem that the volume and complexity of these requests seems to have increased in the last few years, and then particularly since there was this hole in the clerk's office in filling that specific position there. But we've had attorneys spending a lot of time reviewing responsive data to data practices requests, that I think a lot of it can be offloaded to a paralegal, freeing up our attorneys to really focus in on legal work and to really handle, the difficult questions or to provide guidance. And so that's a request we are making. And to the extent the person in this position has any extra free time, we've got all sorts of other work for them to do in the civil division that would be of great benefit and help with the workload in our civil division. With that, we've got our civil litigation group. We have not asked for any particular enhancements in that group. The workload there still remains really heavy, but we have added a support position there in the last year, as well as within the last couple years another litigator position, so that has helped. And again, we have maintained just a great record over the last 6 years. We've won 95% of the cases that are not settled. I mean, we settle, on sometimes fewer than half, sometimes about half of our cases. The rest of them we resolve in court. And of that, we have 190 wins out of 202 cases from 2008 through 2013, which is a pretty darn good record, I would say. CARS requests, part of our office is on 310 and a half. That area was not remodeled when we moved into City Hall, so we want to create some work areas there. We have wasted space that our litigators can use when they're prepping cases for trial and doing big document productions. That's what that CARS request is. And that about sums it up. The last thing I want to highlight is grant revenues. So the Downtown Improvement District in 2014, and we expect, I haven't had a meeting with them yet, but we expect about the same level of funding from them for the Downtown 100 program in 2015. The Burn Justice Assistant Grant funds 2 community attorney positions. That's been in place for a long time through, the formula grant. And then we did succeed in getting another federal Violence Against Women Act grant. It started this January, and that funds 0.6 of a prosecutor who's housed down in the Family Violence Unit of Minneapolis Police Department. We previously were given one-time funds, hoping, on the thought that we would be able to get a VAWA grant, and we did succeed on that. The rest of that funding goes for additional investigation services focusing on gone on arrival cases, which really need a lot of attention and can be quite dangerous situations for the victim, as well as funding to FTEs for domestic abuse advocates to go along with that work. They're split between Casa de Esperanza, Asian Women United, and the Domestic Abuse Project. So are there any questions?
Not seeing any. But I do want to thank you for your presentation. Obviously, there's a lot more detail than what you were able to share with us today, and that'll be included on the website as we're able to post the full presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, and happy to provide any additional information any of you want between now and December or whenever the budget's voted on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Allows us for a couple of moments of transition time to our final hearing of the day. Mr. Todd will be joining us as the city assessor. I think you do the computer. Pardon? You want to click on the computer pull down to find where you're on the network right now. There you go. Okay. Glad to be there. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That helped me out a lot.
Mr. Todd, welcome, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, council members, my name is Patrick Todd. I'm the Minneapolis City Assessor, and with me is Rebecca Malmquist, my Director of Assessments in the office. So she will help me with my presentation as we go through. The first chart, we do have the department's organizational chart. By business line, we do only have one business line for the most part. The way that is organized based on business line is on the left-hand column. We have our department activities, which is what we typically do throughout the year: equalization, sales verification, permits, classifications, parcel reconfiguration, and tax exempt. The center column, which is those are the primary customers within the city of Minneapolis that we serve, and then on the far right column, those are the points of community engagement that we meet. We do, again, we only have one business line. If you're interested in an organizational chart, more traditional, I did provide one at the very last slide within my PowerPoint presentation based on position, so if that's something of interest. On the next slide, we do have the mayor's recommended budget for my department. It is at about $4.8 million, almost $4.9 million. This is about a 5% increase over last year, which we were at about 4.6. The only change really between last year and this year is the inflationary costs associated with wages and benefits, in addition to about $135,000 CARS capital improvement request, which we will talk about a little bit later within the budget presentation. I purposely and intentionally did not ask for any additional dollars this year. I do know that the mayor is looking for ways that how are we going to best align our resources within the department to grow the city of Minneapolis, show that we're an efficient run organization, as well as closing the gap on equity. And instead of asking for additional dollars, I felt that it was more important that we spend the time probably this year looking internally, looking at how we're looking at our own business processes, making sure that we try to get ourselves best positioned to try to close those gaps. And in addition to that, just looking at how we deliver services. I feel that maybe by next year, we're maybe in a better position to ask for dollars, but this year I felt that I think we can actually move the dial quite a bit based on just, how we perceive the opportunities, how we are currently interacting with the customers. So you don't really see any new programs in my budget at all for this year. But I do think that we'll be able to make some successes on the mayor's 3 goals. So the very next slide talks a little bit about our single business line, which is appraisal and assessment services. Again, it kind of sounds redundant, but we do property inspections. We do administer the exemptions, as well as other property tax relief programs. We do the data and record management, tax court litigation. We do neighborhood and business engagement, or business relationships. In addition to those, we have partnerships with CPAD. We have partnerships with finance and regulatory services. We have partnerships with the city attorneys, neighborhood, NCR, neighborhood groups, the media, the University of Minnesota. So we do have quite a bit of engagement in addition to just doing our own day-to-day operations, which is very heavily regulated by the Minnesota statute as well as the Department of Revenue. So that's a little bit about us. So to focus on what we're going to do a little bit differently for 2015, if we focus on growing the city, I identified 3 things that probably aren't earth-shattering, but I think, again, it deals with, how we're going to be looking at our own services and how we're going to be delivering services. The first one is staff as ambassadors and supporters of the city at all touch points. And let me kind of explain what I mean. I'm taking this kind of out of how the DID, the Downtown Improvement District staff workforce work in downtown Minneapolis. They do a fabulous job making people feel welcome, receiving people downtown, making them feel like they can come down and take advantage of a game, take advantage of the restaurants or even the entertainment in downtown Minneapolis. My staff have to have that same type of impact when they're talking with property owners. They need to have that same type of impact when we're out door knocking, when we're out at neighborhood meetings, when we're out just even on the phone. I mean, if people are approached or if my staff have the attitude that they're really ambassadors, they really are trying to sell all the great things about the city of Minneapolis that are out there, we have an opportunity to convince people that this is where you want to be. This is where you want to move, whether you rent or you own. This is where you really want to be. And I think if you have the ability to have that kind of an impact, I think we would have a greater chance of growing the city, because we don't, as assessors, we don't have a lot of opportunities. So we have to be a little bit more creative. So I felt that was one way that we could try to move the dime on growing the city of Minneapolis. I actually have the goal of meeting with the people that run the DID and asking them what kind of training did they put their own staff through. And I would look to see if we couldn't then mirror a training program within the city of Minneapolis, because I have the utmost respect for some of the good work that they've done. The second bullet, which is Minneapolis real estate information and education, is easily accessible and promotes the benefits of buying and living in Minneapolis. So what does this mean? This means that when you look at our website today, you see program descriptions. You see dates and deadlines, and you see frequently asked questions. That's really not an opportunity to engage people when they're out looking at the Minneapolis Assessor's website. If they're out looking at the Minneapolis Assessor's website, there's an interest there already that people are looking to Minneapolis for something. And if they're looking for something, it's probably real estate related. Our website should be very inviting. Our website should be looking to say, if you're interested enough to take a look at our website, then let us help you make that decision, whatever that decision may be. If you're looking for, sometimes it's just a matter of understanding property taxes and the role of the assessor. I'm going to probably jump to an example in King County, Seattle, Washington. If you go out to their website, they have 3 videos that they've developed, very short, 2 to 3 minutes. But let me just give you one video is on how property assessments work. The second video is assessing your property value, and the third one is the King County Assessor at your service. Again, 2 to 3 minutes. They're very enjoyable to listen to. They're very engaging. When you get done watching it, you go, well, that's pretty neat. You learned a lot about that in a very short period of time. If I were to put that into text, I'd have 2 to 3 pages worth of text that I probably couldn't get someone to read. But through a quick video or 2, I think we could really get some more engagement with the citizens that are looking to Minneapolis. And the thing I like really about it is that We can change that from an English-speaking video to a Spanish-speaking to a Somali-speaking. We can take that video and really apply it to a lot of the communities that we have out in the city of Minneapolis, and it would be very inexpensive. So how do we reach people? Well, we have them already at our website. What are we going to do to help them make that decision to be part of Minneapolis? And again, I guess it's more of taking a marketing approach to, instead of just saying, these are the deadlines, these are the programs, and these are frequently asked questions, to here are some great tools of living in Minneapolis. Here's why you would want to live in Minneapolis, and you're going to get that from our website. So just a very different approach. And again, with videos, we need to be a little bit more media savvy, and we're not media savvy, and at least not on our website. So third, and not least, is just to ensure that the property tax burden is distributed across all property types and all neighborhoods fairly and equitably. Property taxes can, in and of itself, keep someone from buying in Minneapolis. It really can. It's a fairly significant investment. When people are looking from city to city, they will compare property taxes before they make the final decision. People have told me, and I think you've probably heard it too, is people will say, I don't mind paying taxes. I just want to pay my fair share. And I think we need to do a much better job, because we have statistics that show we really do a very good job making sure that property values are fairly and equitably assessed. So whether you own a $50,000 house or you own a $5 million house, your value is so close to market value that you're paying your fair share. And if we aren't really doing a great job communicating that, we might be missing out on opportunities for people that would consider Minneapolis, but are taking a look at taxes as a factor that might deter them. We also need to do a better job of selling the benefits. Now, City of Minneapolis does have higher taxes. I wouldn't say the highest taxes in the metro, but we do have a higher tax rate. But to convert that tax dollar into tax benefits is something that I think we oftentimes also have a missed opportunity. Those taxes go for safe streets, solid infrastructures, clean water. We pay for convention centers, the safeties of the downtown. Looking at our website, you just see stats and numbers, but we don't talk about benefits. And I think that one of my goals for 2015 is to talk about the benefits when people are on our website. And how that correlates back to taxes. So
that's a terrific vision and communication strategy.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for bringing that forward. I assume one of your greatest users would be real estate agents. And as they're trying to evaluate and make offerings available to residents, homeowners, they're looking for that kind of information too. I know you partner with them in evaluating what sales are.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think we could, we could use maybe some insight that they might have. We could maybe even ask them to give us their feedback and comments of what they would love to see on our website that would help them sell Minneapolis. Because I absolutely know people that are strong supporters of the city of Minneapolis that are real estate agents. And the more we could do to help them convince taxpayers or prospective buyers, I should say, to move into Minneapolis, they would be very, very excited about that. Running the city well, we need to be more proactive on administering property tax programs. That's really incumbent upon us if we're going to run the city well. And some of the things I want to talk about as far as running the city well is that programs are communicated and accessible and easy to complete for taxpayers. There's somewhat of an implied assumption that when somebody buys a home in Minneapolis, that they know what to do, that they know that there's a homestead program that they should just either come on down to the office or jump online and log in and fill out the appropriate homestead application information. There's kind of an implied assumption that when a person owns a home, that we do have a blind and disabled homestead program, not homestead, blind and disabled property tax relief program. We have a veterans exclusion program. Other than information that we put out on our website, we are not proactive at getting that information out. And I think we need to do a much better job. And to your point, Mr. Chair, I think we need to do a much better job training and educating our fellow appraisers, real estate agents, as well as closing companies. These people are working quite closely with buyers and even sellers in the market. And if they are at least informing their buyers that, okay, this is what you're going to want to do at the end, I think we might be able to make sure that everybody that's entitled to property tax relief is getting property tax relief. And that's no, I mean, and I'll talk about it a little bit better or a little bit later, is we need to make sure that we're doing a better job of reaching out to the communities of color, because I think that we're really missing the boat on the participation within those communities as well. You know, when we talk about other running the city well, there's in my second bullet point, it's cross-departmental initiatives that provide new or better services to the community. We do, again, partner with NCR, but we're not to that extent where they're setting up neighborhood engagement meetings and that we're partnering with them, because anytime I've ever been to a meeting, it seems like there's a crowd that will follow me because they just can't ask enough questions. They just really are starving, I think, for information about property tax questions, valuation trends, what if impacts value. You know, and I enjoy that, but we need to do more. I need to know when, you know, the director, Mr. Rubidor, and I need to work much closer on what are they doing and when can we be there to help participate. Regulatory services, this is something that's kind of I thought it was always, you know, I thought about this in the back of my head. I really wish we could ever figure this out. Regulatory services makes multiple inspections of home as new construction is going up, as additions are being done, and they're inspecting properties at the beginning of it, oftentimes at the, you know, when they're doing the rough end, when they're doing the finished work, and then they will sign off on maybe the occupancy. And when they get all done, then we get notified to come out and take a look at the property. And then when we try to set up that appointment, property owner says, well, the city's already been here, we should be done. And we're saying, no, we really need to be coming out and taking a look at this particular property. And they don't distinguish between, well, that was regulatory services and this is the assessors, until we do tell them that it is, you know, property tax related. It would be very convenient if we had a better connectivity between final inspections and when the assessor's office has, you know, can come out and take a look at it. Because if we can be there when they're signing off on that code or that project, and we're walking through together, then we never have to make that follow-up phone call, ask that property owner to take some time off from work, or to put, you know, find daycare, or to do whatever the case may be, so that we can come through for our 20-minute, 30-minute, or up to an hour inspection, depending on the complexity of the project. So it just seems like there's an opportunity there. I'm not sure how we would do it. I know that we're oftentimes running in different circles, but I do have at least the idea that I think there may be an opportunity there if we spend some time trying to figure it out. So last but not least, it's just dealing with CPED, looking at CPED. We don't do a good job coordinating services. We're both oftentimes in the same real estate market. We both oftentimes have subscriptions to the same publications, have memberships to the same organization. We're also oftentimes asking for research and analysis from the same vendors who are selling it to both their department and my department. You know, we need to work closer together. We need to make sure that we only are paying for one subscription if we only need one subscription. If we can share that information, that's fabulous. And that memberships are not, there's just not duplicative. And I don't think that's, again, we're not dealing with tens of thousands of dollars, but it just seems like when the mayor asked for running the city well, if we can find ways that we can, even on publications and subscriptions and memberships, we should probably be very astute and studious of those dollars as well. So I'll be working with the new CPED director, just flushing out ideas of ways we can maybe share resources as we go forward. Closing the gap on equity. This might sound a little bit redundant, but it's not. It's partnering with NCR to work with communities of color. Again, I had the opportunity to work with an urban scholar earlier this summer, and we spent quite a bit of time looking at statistics of appeals. You know, in our business, there is this assumption that when we send out 130,000 notices, that we tell the property owner, this is what we think it's worth. And now it's your opportunity to tell us if we're right or wrong. And if we're wrong, then you got to let us know how you arrived at your value. And for the most part, it's a very successful approach. But I think if you were to take a look at the demographics, if you were to take a look at the number of appeals based on ethnicity, you'd find that there's a lot of property owned by communities of color, and they just really never pick up the phone and call. And it could be that they don't understand what the process is. It could be that they feel intimidated. It could be that culturally, that where they might have come from, you just never approached government. There could be other barriers that we aren't even aware of. This is something that's probably very passionate for me and probably be my number one project for 2015, is we need to get involved, we need to get engaged, we need to find people that are within these communities that can take a leadership role and if nothing else, help us understand what the barriers are so we can design policies and procedures or approaches to get this information out so people feel like they have the ability to call and appeal their value if they feel it's wrong. Again, they're not doing it today. Statistically speaking, I can demonstrate that they're just not doing it, and we don't know why. And so part of the 2015 will be absolutely figuring out why, and then trying to find ways to help them understand or give them the tools or empower them to make that to take advantage of really the opportunities that everybody else is afforded, and for whatever reason they're just not taking advantage of them. So that's really high on my priority list. Website information we talked a little bit about. It's got to be translated into multiple languages. Again, it's just a missed opportunity. It really, really is. And that would, I think, would help with as far as closing the gap of equity. This is something else that I've spent a fair amount of time looking at other websites to try to figure out who else had programs out there for communities of color. And surprisingly, there's very few. If I looked at 50 websites, I found maybe one. And if it was one, it might have been some reference to. And oftentimes it was just a translated document or something like that. I was very, very surprised that someone has not had a great success at developing or doing the outreach into communities of color. In addition to when I was doing that research, I found that there's a lot of websites that provide a lot more information that is useful information. When you're out at the assessor's website, you can actually access links to home remodeling clinics and currently Hennepin County puts on what's called a Fix-It clinic. We should be able to link to that. So when people are on our website, they understand that there's a Fix-It clinic offered through Hennepin County. We should be able to offer information that CPED's doing. We should be able to put information out there for vacant lots. When people are on the assessor's website, they might be thinking of buying something. And why are we not making sure that information is right in front of them when they're actually out surfing the internet? I mean, to go from our website to say, well, I'll just logically go to CPED is probably a poor assumption. So I think we need to do a lot more with just making sure that our website has is more robust and more interesting and has a lot more tools available to the typical taxpayer or the typical property owner. And I think that by doing that, again, we might be able to do a better job of doing some outreach into and closing the equity gap. If I wanted to summarize that last section, I would just say that, for my department to close the equity gap, we would partner with NCR to identify the issues and barriers with communities of color. We'll update our website into multiple languages, and we'll design a website to be more informative, more educational, along with providing links to other internal and external agencies that might benefit all the taxpayers. The next slide shows a few slides out of our Results Minneapolis report. I'll be giving my Results Minneapolis presentation tomorrow. You are all officially welcome tomorrow. So on the top left, what you'll see is the cost per parcel, how we rank against the other cities within Hennepin County. You'll find we're for the most part right in the middle. There's 5 that charge more on a per parcel, this is very simplistic, but if you take the entire budget of the assessor's office, divide by the number of parcels, and that's what your cost per parcel is. So there are 5 municipalities or 5 cities that have a larger cost per parcel, and we have 4 that are less. From a taxpayer standpoint of view, and probably from a council standpoint, this is a thumbs up, absolutely. From a department head standpoint, I would rather be Bloomington. I think if you compare City of Minneapolis with Bloomington, Brooklyn Center, Edina, Maple Grove, all those cities that have larger budgets on a per parcel basis, and say, do they have a downtown like the City of Minneapolis? They don't. Do they have the infrastructure that we have? They don't. Do they have the neighborhood range from the very successful to the very challenged neighborhoods? They don't. If you were to pick a city that would pay the most and invest as much as they would into their assessment department, the logical assumption would be the city of Minneapolis would have the largest, most robust department. That would be my own editorial. But that being said, we are running a very efficient organization. We are meeting all our statutory requirements. We provide high quality services as far as doing reviews, board cases, tax court cases. We're really truly successful on all fronts. And we're doing it for really a lot less than a lot of the other cities are doing it. Again, that's credit to my staff. I cannot really take any credit for that, but my goal someday would to try to shift that to be up there because I think that my staff deserve it. I think the citizens of Minneapolis deserve it. And it'll be my job to convince you going forward that my budget deserves it as well. So
I don't know. If I were you, I would go to Bloomington and say, look how much money you're wasting. Another perspective.
Yeah. But not this year. So if we look at the top right, which is, it came out of the citizen survey, and this was from last year, so this is not, this is a year old. 59% of the city felt that their taxes were fair and reasonable for the services they were providing, or 88%, if you include that the people that thought it was only fair. But only 12% thought that the taxes were disproportionate to the services they provided. And that's positive. And that helps when my staff are out door knocking, when we're out there talking in neighborhood meetings and things like that. If we had more people feeling that the taxes that they were paying were in the only fair or poor, it would be very contentious and very difficult for us to be successful. But I think for the most part, people are very receptive when my staff go door knocking, when we're meeting with people in neighborhood meetings. It's a good thing. So lower left-hand corner, which is the sales ratio. This is the measure by the Department of Revenue on the quality of our assessment. And for the most part, we're right in there based on the statutory guidelines of, the 90 to 105. You can see it as, if you look at the far left, when the market was rising from 03, 04, 05, and we were chasing the market up, those ratios were low because the market kept growing faster than we were moving our assessments up. When we got into the Great Depression, they called it, where foreclosures were high, we were chasing the market down and our ratios were high. And then in this last assessment for 2013, because we haven't finished 2014, we can't provide that information yet. You can see we're in the low 90s. That market changed on a dime for Minneapolis. It really, really did. Right now, you would look at that and you would say Minneapolis is 92% of market value. So what's typically selling, the assessor's office is, if it sells for 100, we're typically at 92%. We're not at 98 or 99. Our target's 98, so we're probably light because we kind of missed we underestimated how fast the market turned for Minneapolis. But going forward, we anticipate that we'll probably see some increases unless something happens between now and the end of the year, that we do have a little bit of movement in our tax base to go up. And last but not least would be the percent of levy collection. And we put this in there only because the amount of levy that the city generates and the amount of dollars within the city budget can be impacted by property tax refunds. And if we lose a significant case, we can give away millions of dollars, and that comes right out of the city general fund. And so we take that very seriously, and so we do monitor that. And you can see the 2010, 2011 weren't as a result of any tax court cases per se. It was more of a reflection of taxes not being collected because of foreclosures. But then you'll also see the years after that, when those properties did sell, those taxes were collected. They were just, through an accounting process, allocated to a different year. Because generally speaking, foreclosures, unless they go from a foreclosure to a vacant lot, those taxes will get collected at some point in time. Near the end here, I only have, I think, 2 slides left. Just the links to the goals and values. The goals that I identified earlier in my presentation would be with the One Minneapolis, as well as a city that works. And then when we talk about values, I think that we talked, my budget is fairly well aligned with the equity value as well as the growth value. And I think, so if this is my time to brag, it would be, how's our department doing? we're doing really well in community engagement. This has been kind of fun. Before I took over in 2005, our 2004 community engagement for our department was at 45%. Then the next survey was 06, we were at 52, then we've been moved to 58, 62, and now we're at 65. So every year we've been able to do more and more and make a difference on community engagement. And we just had our all department-wide community engagement meeting with staff yesterday, where we went and we identified those issues. We talked about the survey results. We had them vote on what they felt were the top issues that they wanted to work on, and we're going to be then developing teams to try to address those one at a time. So, but the meeting went well. People were very participatory. They were open and honest, which is great to have. They had some creative and thoughtful suggestions, and they were excited to get started. So to me, maybe just because it was really recent, I'm kind of excited about that. So it's great to have staff that are excited about working and doing problem solving and things like that. So, and then the last but not least, I believe, is my the CARS request. That's for our mobile tablets. Our mobile tablets are about 4 years old. For being a mobile tablet, you know, we get kind of spoiled today. These were cutting edge back about 4 years ago. These are tablets that look like laptop computers today. They weigh about 4 pounds. The battery life on them used to be 6 to 8 hours, are down to about an hour and a half. The new tablets that the city is looking at adopting that I've seen through the IT department, they look very similar to an iPad as far as size and weight and shape. They have 8 to 10 hour battery life. I think that's probably the way to go. They're actually quite a bit faster in processing time. So that's, I think we're definitely at the end of the life cycle for the old tablets. 4 pounds does get to be quite a heavy tool when people are out there carrying it for 2, 3, and 4 hours. So I think that this is a good time to transition to that. It is something that's been on our budget or our long-term plan, which was this year to refresh those for 2015. So if you'd be so kind as to consider that in your budget consideration, we would appreciate it. And that's all I have for my presentation today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Todd. I just wanted to touch a little bit on the technology. I remember being in this setting a few years ago when we were talking about technology, using Wi-Fi, using our subscriptions, and having a better contact with residents. Obviously, you demonstrated that right off the top, and we're looking forward to those continued investments in how to interact and provide the tools you need to do your job. Councilmember Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, I just want to know, because I think this is the first time in many years that you haven't included a slide that talked about the number of appeals that are happening and then how that's impacting both the work within your department, but also property tax base and all that. So I didn't know if you had any comments for us. I'm assuming it's not in there because maybe those trends are going down, but maybe I'm just speculating. So.
To the chair, Councilmember Glidden, you are very correct. It was an oversight. I apologize. I should have probably thrown in some statistics because when the real estate market does get better, does improve, the appeals do go down. So we did peak in 2010, and I think we had 1,300 actual cases, and then when you correlate that to parcels, it was around 2,600 if I'm not mistaken. So we had quite a bit of litigation, and that truly is coming through the pike as we speak, because it takes about 2 to 2+ years before those cases actually get to the point where you're negotiating and trying to settle them, or they go to court. Today, I think when we looked at the close, the last day to apply, or the last day to appeal your 2013 value was April 30th. Those numbers have come through, and I think we're around 236 or so, less than 250. Again, and that's from a peak of around 1,300. So that will help tremendously 2 years from now, but that doesn't necessarily help us much today. But the amount of risk that we have under appeal going forward is comforting. It was when we were going through the very difficult time of foreclosures, and we knew that there was a lot of appeals. And as you even saw in our sales ratio, you know, chasing that market up, and then the market drops like a rock, and we're chasing it down. We knew that we would have to give back a few dollars in the litigation. So, if you'd like, I could follow up with an email showing you a chart. I'm sure I have that in my folder at the office.
Yeah, I think it's also, if I'm not mistaken, included in the results presentation that'll be shared, I think tomorrow, right? Okay, that's pretty current information. We'll make sure people get a hold of that information. Do you have anything else, Councilmember? I didn't mean to cut you off. Good. Well, thank you. Mr. Todd, just a quick question on terms of staffing. How many actual full-time employees do you have on staff, and do you have any vacancies? And are we anticipating any retirements in the near future, and how are we going to fill those seats?
Good question, Mr. Chair. My office has 36 FTEs. I still have the chief appraiser vacant. I had a residential appraiser vacant, but that position has been offered to another appraiser. We had a real estate, we went through a reclassification from an assessor 3, and it was reclassified into what's called a principal appraiser. We had offered that position to an individual. They've accepted it, and they start on the 29th. For the most part, the only position I have open that really we haven't been able to start advertising for would be the chief appraiser position, because we've been having to try to get some of the other positions filled, which were higher priority for me, to be honest with you. As far as retirements go, I do have one of my senior management members who said could be January, could be April. And that'll be a very difficult position to fill. His successor, this is always the challenge with succession plans. We had literally had an individual identified to be my manager's successor. He was in training for about 1.5 years, and about 3 weeks ago, Dakota County hired him away. And it was a shock, to say the least. We tried to see if we couldn't meet him on pay and wage and benefits, and we couldn't. And now he works for Dakota County. So in a section that where you had great leadership and great wisdom, institutional knowledge, and the person that was supposed to follow in the footsteps, I'm down now to my third string quarterback, and I don't think he had any goals and aspirations of filling that position, to be honest with you. That really wasn't part of his career path. So his career path was actually the person that was going to be the successor. He's been the understudy to handle that position. So I'm not sure what we're going to do at this point in time. These positions for when we're talking about IT within the assessor's office, when you're doing the calculations when TIF districts sunset and the TIF districts want to come back on and you want to do that at 50%, those calculations are very difficult. I could not do them myself, but this gentleman, Scott Lindquist in my office, absolutely had the skills and abilities to do that calculation. And he was very valuable at the time when the TIF districts downtown Minneapolis were sunsetting as well as being put back on. So to answer your question, what are we planning on doing? That's we're hoping to probably steal somebody from another municipality. There's only a handful of people that are even in the metro area. So maybe we need to cast the net farther out and see if we can attract somebody from another state. But to be truthful, we don't. The salary range that these positions are generally don't get people to sell their house and move. They really don't. So it pays under 100. So it's always a challenge. So often it's grow your own, and we've been working with that grow your own philosophy, and we just happen to gotten caught this time. So
appreciate those thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Todd, as always.
Thank you.
Pleasure. And just to keep things moving along, we're obviously finished with our presentations today. We need to take a formal action to receive and file, but a quorum and a vote is not necessary on that. So we'll do that at this point. So the clerk can receive and file these presentations. And we look forward to the next series of budget presentations, which will be on September 18th. That's Thursday, beginning at 9:30. We'll be dealing with CPED, regulatory services, and the mayor's office. So thank you very much, Mr. Todd. And Ms. Christensen, we are adjourned.